Welcome into Rogue Football, where it is all draft, all the time. Throughout this summer, we're going to be looking at every NFL team through the lens of the NFL draft, of what they did in 2025 through the draft, through free agency, and their team outlook looking ahead at this upcoming season. So we're going to get it started with the New Orleans Saints, who, according to some sites, different sites have different odds, but they're at the bottom or close to the bottom on pretty much every site when it comes to the Super Bowl odds. So New Orleans Saints fans, this one is for you. We're going to take a look at their 2025 draft class, how it informs what they can be in 2025, and also obviously look through the roster. Uh, New regime here in terms of the coaching staff, right? Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley as defensive coordinator. Definitely an interesting couple of guys to bring in. I personally am probably a little bit higher on Kellen Moore than a lot of folks are around the league. I don't think he's the most creative offensive play caller there is, but I do think he earned this job. I think he earned the right to lead an organization, lead a franchise from the head coaching spot. And Brandon Staley, we all know as a defensive coordinator, did a really good job, even in Los Angeles as the head coach, had some really impressive game plans as a defensive head coach, just kind of, I think, didn't always kind of handle every situation the best as a head coach. But as a defensive mind, I do think Brandon Staley certainly brings a lot to the table. But looking at this draft class, you go get Kelvin Banks with the 9th overall pick. It was a little early, in my opinion, for Kelvin Banks to come off the board, but I do appreciate prioritizing the offensive line. You now have 2 straight years where you bring in, pretty big time draft capital, offensive lineman, Talise Fuaga last year. You get in Kelvin Banks this year. You have Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy, Dylan Radins comes over. You've got some options, and then I think you're looking at your guy who hasn't had the best start to his career. Trevor Penning kicking inside to guard is what it's looking like. So it's possible that this could be a pretty good offensive line. You look at the skill position talent. You bring in Brandon Cooks, who has been away from New Orleans for quite some time, but returns to the Saints. Obviously, Chris Olave, if he's able to stay healthy with Rashid Shaheed and Brandon Cooks, that's a nice group of pass catchers. You have Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau. Very, very good tight end room overall, I would say. And then looking at the rest of this draft after Kelvin Banks, you bring in Tyler Shuck, right, at 40 overall. I thought it was a little early. He does have all the arm talent you could be asking for, but to me, the bigger issue than the age is the injury risk and the fact that muddy pockets are a pretty big problem for him. Now, if that Saints offensive line can keep him clean, there's a chance that, if Chris Olave is able to stay healthy, Rashid Shaheed and Brandon Cooks, there's a chance you could have some definite explosiveness in this offense with Tyler Shuck's arm, because he is a very talented thrower of the football. Again, it's just kind of the pocket stuff that you worry about. Standing strong in the pocket, not being scared to get hit. And again, a lot of injuries throughout his career. So that's kind of the injury, the risk, the reason I'm not quite as high on that pick. Now, did they have a lot of options at quarterback? Were there a lot of great options? I would have personally taken Shedeur over Tyler Shuck, but that's not the route they opted to go. You would think Kellen Moore definitely signed off on the quarterback as a former quarterback himself, the offensive head coach. So they're excited about bringing him in. You also went and got Vernon Broughton out of Texas, who's a pretty talented overall interior defensive lineman who I think can get after it, kind of, in the mold of a Carl Granderson a little bit. So I like that. I like Jonas Sanker as well, the safety out of Virginia. He can run. He's got some length. He can tackle. Danny Stutzman was one of the more underrated linebackers in this class. You bring him in. You got Pete Werner. You've got Demario Davis. He can come in and develop. A future starter there for sure in my mind. Quincy Riley at cornerback, another pick I like a lot. You have Kool-Aid McKinstry, you have Isaac Yiadom. I think Quincy Riley comes in and competes with Yiadom pretty quickly. And you're looking at that defensive backfield, and I love Kool-Aid. You have Tyrann Mathieu. You brought in Justin Reed, who has played with Tyrann Mathieu, both those guys from Kansas City. Strong Kansas City flavor here on the defensive side of the ball for the Saints. But you've got Alontae Taylor at nickel. So there's a lot to get excited about when you look at this defense overall. And again, Brandon Staley is a good defensive coach. And then getting into the 6th round late in the draft here, Devin Neal comes in out of Kansas, balanced running back. I think will complement what you have in Alvin Kamara, in Kendre Miller, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So all good there. And then getting Matavayo and Diggs at the end of the draft, I think both of those guys can come in and compete and probably make the roster and potentially have roles down the road. So overall, I mean, even though to me Banks was a little early, but I do love prioritizing offensive line. I personally would have definitely gone Josh Simmons, even with the injury, over a Kelvin Banks Jr., but that's just my opinion. Then Tyler Shough, we'll see. That's the quarterback they wanted. They got what they wanted there at quarterback, and so Saints fans should be on board with this in my mind. Now, the thing with the Saints overall, to me, they're a team that just refuses to really rebuild, right? They're constantly trying to stay competitive, and that can be fun. I don't think it leads them to be a team that has much of a chance right now to really compete at the highest level, but I do think they're also a team that has a floor where you're going to be in a lot of football games. Bottom line, I mean, I think the offensive line is good enough to compete. I think the receivers and offensive weapons are good enough to compete. I think the defense is very strong. Demario Davis, still a great player. Pete Werner, a very good player. Danny Stutzman coming in. I think that he's going to have a role in this league. I think he's eventually going to be a starter. Defensive front, Chase Young played well down the stretch for them, right? Very well. You still have Cameron Jordan, Carl Granderson. Isaiah Foskey hasn't quite hit, but you have Brian Bresee, Colin Saunders, Vernon Broughton comes in. There's a lot here. And I think Brandon Staley probably can get the most out of it. I said I like the defensive backfield too. So I think this is going to be a competitive team. I don't think that's a team that should be viewed as like bottom of the league. But I also don't think they're good enough to really even win their division, probably. I think they're going to be close to 500, depending on the quarterback play. I think they can be close to 500. 7-8 wins is what I would be looking at right now for the New Orleans Saints. I don't think that's good enough to win your division, obviously. There's a couple, every other team in this division probably feels like they have a more clear direction with the organization. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers building around that passing attack with Baker Mayfield and all those talented weapons. They had a really strong draft as well themselves at cornerback. Carolina Panthers building around Bryce Young, that offensive line, going to get Ted McMillan for him. Atlanta Falcons really did a lot to try to improve their pass rush and their defense this offseason, but they've got Michael Penix they feel good about. I think the Saints have the least clear path forward at quarterback in the division, and overall, that's the most important position in sports, and it's hard for me to completely buy in to what this plan is. When you have a young quarterback, an old roster around him overall, this is kind of what Mickey Loomis has done over the last decade or so. You constantly stay competitive, but are you good enough to really compete at the highest level in January? I don't think so. So, not a bad football team, really. But is it a football team that has any real superpowers, that has the ability to win meaningful games? I don't see that, honestly. I don't see that. So I think that they had a draft that you can feel good about overall. I'd probably give this draft like a B plus, especially when you look at the depth of the draft for the Saints here. I like some of the moves free agent-wise. I mean, bringing Brandon Cooks back, I have no problem with that. Adding a Justin Reed, Isaac Yiadom, who did play better in New Orleans than he did in San Francisco last year. Devon Godchaux. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these moves in a vacuum, but I just don't know how you're really getting past your own division. I don't really know how you view this team moving forward. If Tyler Shuck's the answer, then great. But I have a hard time seeing that with his injury history and with his inability to really handle pressure at a high level. So that's where I'm at with the New Orleans Saints. Would love to know what y'all think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoy the content here, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.